Talking with Steve Bauer, Director of SpiderTech, Powered by Planet Energy, but for this weekend, the Director of the Canadian National Team, powered by SpiderTech, a joint effort between the national team and your team, Steve, to race these two ProTour races that have come to Canada.
Yes,
now, tell me about how that came together.
Well, I mean, it was an important mandate for our team SpiderTech to be here. You know, as a team, we approached the UCI and we lobbied to have a continental team compete on the ProTour circuit, which is really going against the regulations. They wouldn't budge. So the only invitation is open to national team, as national teams allowed to ride the ProTour events when they are within your nation. So we formed a partnership with the national team to add support and infrastructure with the group. So I could be present, and we could prepare our athletes for the event, and we could basically help with our staff and what we have in place to push the team forward.
Now you picked. There are 12 athletes, and then from there you picked 8 for this race.
Yes.
I mean, what was the criteria that you were doing for the selection for this specific race?
Well, we were looking at athletes that were going well. There's some athletes that, let's say, a guy like Dominic Roland, who's on the ProTour circuit, was sort of undeniably a rider that would have to be part of the team because of his experience and his status as a ProTour rider, and certain riders that live in Quebec City is obviously very important. But we needed to look at riders that were racing extremely well, and I was in my recommendations, I was very strict about that. So, our SpiderTech team racing in Europe, we're basically proving grounds that those guys were in form. Boivin won stages, Lacombe won a stage, David Bowie got a top 10 at a 1.1, he helped Guillaume won stages. Those guys were racing like top notch. So the challenge would have been very difficult if some of our SpiderTech riders had not been injured. So, for example, if Randall had not been broken his hip, he was riding very good, and Ryan Roth had more patellar injury, and Martin Gilbert crashed in Perez and he couldn't race. So it was actually made this selection a little bit easier, quote, politically, because in all honesty, I think our SpiderTech guys were all going pretty good. But I think, in the end, and in all honesty, I think we have a great team. I think the selection was made with great balance. I think we have the best team we can field in both Quebec and Montreal. I think we've done a good job.
Now, what changes? I mean, it's obviously days away from Montreal, but changes between the two races?
The biggest change I see is David Bowie is going to do Montreal only. He was riding extremely well in Europe. And my strategy was to withdraw him from Quebec, even though I believe he almost deserves to do both races with his form. But he's young, and I thought, well, Montreal's probably a better course for him, and strategically we can maybe help him as a team better there than we could in Quebec. So I focused David in Montreal. And
so David Veilleux in Montreal, and
David Bowie.
David Bowie, sorry.
David Bowie in Montreal and David Veilleux in Quebec, because David, he's a puncher kind of rider. He's riding strong also. He had a bit of bad luck in Europe, but I'm confident he has the form to do a good race here in Quebec rather than Montreal. So that was a little bit about the balance. Francois Parisian has been racing great all year, and Frank, those performances he did in Tour California, can come up with some stellar rides. So he has the experience. I feel that Frank sort of deserved to do both events. Guillaume, certainly the way he's been riding. Kevin Lacombe, certainly the way he's been riding. They've been just turning some great performances against some really good bike racers.
Have you talked about for tomorrow's race a team captain or who the protected rider is going to be? Have you talked about that?
Yeah, no. In all honesty, I don't see any protected rider. I see, my strategy is to try to get this group racing as smart and as well together as we can, especially in the last kilometers if we have opportunity in the final laps of the race. the race will take its course, and no doubt the level of this race, especially Quebec, the team needs to ride in front, they need to be positioned, they need to follow moves accordingly, watch for splits, and that's really about being smart bike racers and staying in front. My goal is to get them riding in front and riding together to stay in front, and then the race will naturally happen. In the final, that's really when we really need to pull out the stops and make some calls, and hopefully the guys are tight enough to pull out the best performance in the last laps.
Your goal, I mean, obviously the goal is always to win, be on the podium,
Yeah.
but for you, what would satisfy you that this has been a good race for the team?
I'd be satisfying if we can get 2 or 3 of our guys that are riding super into those last laps to be competitive and to really take a shot at winning the race. I'm not saying that I believe there's always a chance to win a bike race, no matter if it's Pro Tour or whatever. You got to aim to win. But I'd be really satisfied if we can pull out some performances in the final laps where guys are in the hunt, they're going for it, they're competitive, and we really feel like we're part of the game in those last laps of this bike race.
Thank you. Okay, Steve, we want to talk about, we talked earlier in Edmonton at Road Nationals about the Pro Continental application. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a little further along now. Papers are being submitted.
Yeah.
Bank guarantees have been given to the UCI.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not
okay.
Yet, no.
So, but where are you in that process, and how's your feelings of confidence about how it's going?
I'm quite confident. Our sponsorship is going along well. We've had some good commitments from our partners. We've paid the fees to the UCI. We're compiling the contracts, rider contracts, insurances, bank guarantee, etc., insurance, what else, budgets. So most of it is a lot of work in documentation and requirements right now. And we'll get that all into the UCI by October 1st, and we'll continue to sign as many riders as we need at 16 minimum by the end of October. So we're on track. I'm quite confident, and we're looking forward to racing here in Quebec and Montreal as Team SpiderTech.
Now, you're talking about the riders, signing riders. I was talking with Will, and he said he has joined you for next year.
Yeah, Will's on board. He's quite excited, and we're excited to have him.
Okay.
To have a Canadian champion, plus a good guy and a strong all-around rider who's ridden extremely well this year. We're happy to strengthen our roster with Will.
Any other signings you can talk about at this point?
Not yet, but we're working on a few. Hopefully in the next week or so we'll have more news on Team SpiderTech 2011.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.